I, 33, male, recently found myself entangled in a tumultuous family drama that has left me questioning the very fabric of trust and loyalty in my family. My dad, whom I have considered a mentor and business partner for over a decade, dropped a bombshell that shattered my world. To provide some context, my dad, 65, male, is a heavy diesel mechanic and has run a small workshop his whole life. I've always been interested in his work since I was a kid and would always help him out on the weekends. I went to college to get my qualifications in automobile engineering so I could get a degree and officially help my dad out. Since I was 23, I have worked with my dad as a mechanic and slowly taken over his workshop. When I started, he had only 2 mechanics who worked for him part-time and 1 car. With my knowledge and experience, I introduced several new strategies, and we have grown to over 35 employees and 15 cars in the last 10 years. We went from $250,000 in revenue to just shy of $7 million this financial year. My dad only works in the workshop while I am more 20-80 workshop to office split. I have dedicated the last 10 years of my life to building the family business from the ground up. The blood, sweat, and tears I poured into it were not merely for personal gain, but with the understanding that one day I would inherit the fruits of my labor. The business became my baby, and I navigated the challenges, weathered the storms, and celebrated the victories with unwavering commitment. I have an older brother, Jerry, 39, male, who went to university and then worked in the city as an accountant. He has never been interested in my dad's business. Growing up, he hated the fact that our dad was a mechanic. He used to feel embarrassed about it and refused to acknowledge it in front of our friends. When I used to help out my dad, my brother would shout at me and tell me that this work was beneath us. Even when I expressed my love for automobiles and ultimately went on to pursue the degree, my brother discouraged me several times, telling me that this degree would get me nowhere and I should find a better career to pursue. Despite his embarrassment, my dad always considered my brother to be his golden child. You see, it wasn't always like this before. My dad used to be equally loving to both of us, but when Jerry was 15 years old, he got pneumonia and was bedridden. The doctors were really concerned with his health and warned us that he might be dangerously close to death. This was an extremely tough time for our entire family. I remember feeling so scared about losing my brother. Throughout the entire hospital stay, Jerry always wanted our dad above anyone else. He used to ask for our dad all the time, and my dad spent countless nights in the hospital, which meant they bonded a lot. Eventually, Jerry recovered and things went back to normal. Yet, my dad continued to favor Jerry over the years. Even when Jerry would grow up to hate our dad's profession, Dad didn't mind and favored him regardless. As I got older, I obviously noticed this favoritism and was understandably hurt that our father always favored Jerry. For example, once my school had an awards ceremony where I was going to be presented an award. I was extremely proud that I won the award and told my parents about it. My mother hugged me while my dad smiled warmly, congratulating me. I told my parents how the school had invited parents to be there for our awards ceremony. I knew my mother might not be able to come, as she worked long night shifts in the hospital, which meant she was always tired throughout the day, so I looked at my dad curiously, expecting him to say that he would be there. My dad looked at me hesitantly, glancing at my mother, who asked him if he could be there for me during the awards ceremony. My dad then cleared his throat and said that he had plans to play basketball with Jerry. My mother looked at him angrily and told him that playing basketball with Jerry wasn't important and he could take Jerry with him to attend my awards ceremony instead. My dad nodded begrudgingly in agreement. The night before the event, my mother reminded my dad during dinner to make sure he showed up at my awards ceremony. Jerry, who was sitting at the dinner table, asked my dad if he was canceling on him for their basketball practice, and my dad explained to him that they could always play basketball the next week. Jerry immediately started expressing his discontentment, saying how he was looking forward to having a father-son time and didn't want to waste his time for my ceremony. My mother retorted back to him that as my big brother, he should be more understanding and supportive as I had won an award. She went on to say that my dad needed to be there for me this one time. On the day of the event, I reminded my dad again before I left for school to make sure he showed up. He told me not to worry about it and that he would be there. During my awards ceremony, I looked around for my dad everywhere, but I couldn't find him. My name was eventually called up and I had to go up to the stage to collect my award. I remember receiving my award from the principal while my schoolmates cheered and I was fervently looking for my dad's face in the crowd. He never showed up. I sent my mother a message saying that my dad never showed up. She immediately called me concerned, asking me if I was sure that my dad didn't show up, and I told her how he wasn't anywhere to be found, and maybe he must have forgotten. My mother told me that was impossible as she had put 5 alarms on his phone, and she couldn't see his car parked in front of our house, which meant he was definitely out. At this point, we were alarmed and felt concerned, thinking maybe something had happened to him. When I reached home after school, I opened the door to see my mom and dad having a huge argument. They were shouting at each other at the top of their voices. The air was thick with tension, and the heated exchange between my parents echoed through the hallway. My mother, her face contorted with anger, stood near the entrance while my dad, looking both guilty and defensive, was attempting to justify his actions. Feeling a mixture of confusion and concern, I cautiously stepped into our living room. I asked my dad curiously if he was okay, my worry palpable as I mentioned that he never showed up at my school for the award ceremony. The room fell silent for the moment while my dad tried to avoid eye contact and mumbled an apology, something about losing track of time and unforeseen circumstances. I could sense that his explanation wasn't adding up, but before I could press further, my mother unleashed a torrent of frustration and disappointment. "Why did you show up, John?" she demanded, her voice sharp and accusatory. "Tell me the truth. Our son won an award and you promised him you would be there. What could be more important than that?" Dad shifted uncomfortably, clearly aware that he was in the hot seat. Before he could respond, Jerry entered the room with an air of nonchalance, eating an ice cream. My mother turned her ire towards Jerry, her eyes narrowing in disbelief and anger. "And what's your role in all of this, Jerry? Where were you and your dad, and why didn't you support your brother in his big day?" Jerry, with a shrug that exuded indifference, muttered something about how he had suddenly craved ice cream and had asked our dad to drive him to the ice cream shop first. Later, when they drove to my school, they were informed that they had missed the awards ceremony, so they drove back home. My mother's face turned from anger to incredulity as she processed this absurd excuse. "You skipped your brother's awards ceremony for ice cream?" she exclaimed, her voice rising incredulously. "You and your father missed his big moment because you wanted ice cream?" Amidst the escalating tension, my dad, instead of apologizing and admitting his mistake, tried to defend Jerry and justify his actions, stammering out an explanation that only added fuel to the fire. "Look, it's not a big deal," he began, attempting to downplay the significance of my awards ceremony. "It's just an awkward ceremony and there'll be more in the future. Jerry wanted an ice cream and I thought we could just grab a quick one. I didn't think it was such a big deal." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own father, the person I had expected to be there to share in my joy, was diminishing the significance of my achievement. The dismissive tone and the casual brushing aside of a moment I had been looking forward to left me speechless. As his words hung in the air, my initial shock turned into a potent mix of frustration and sadness. A lump formed in my throat and I felt the sting of unshed tears. My achievement, the recognition for my hard work and dedication, was being swept aside as inconsequential. At that moment, I realized that it wasn't just about missing the ceremony. It was about the lack of understanding, the absence of support, and the crushing feeling that my accomplishments were not valued by those I held closest. I looked at my dad, the one who was supposed to be a source of encouragement, with a mix of disbelief and betrayal, my eyes mirroring the profound disappointment I felt in my heart. My mother continued to express her disappointment, scolding them both for prioritizing an impromptu ice cream craving over a significant milestone in my life. As their argument raged on, I continued to feel a sense of betrayal and hurt. Feeling a heavy weight on my chest and a lump in my throat, I mustered a weak smile and told my dad, "It's okay, Dad. Don't worry about it." The words tasted bitter on my tongue, forced out to mask the deeper emotions swirling within me. I didn't want to escalate the argument or add more strain to the already tense atmosphere. As I retreated to my room, the facade I had maintained for my dad crumbled. The door closed behind me, shutting out the outside world, and I allowed the floodgates to open. The tears held back in front of my parents streamed down my face. The weight of the disappointment, the hurt, the profound sense of being let down overwhelmed me. My mom, seeing me upset, came into my room to comfort me. She sat beside me, putting her arm around my shoulder. She didn't say much, just let me cry and vent my feelings. Her presence was reassuring, and I felt a bit better knowing she was there for me. After a while, she spoke gently. "I know it hurts, sweetheart. Your dad messed up, and I'm sorry you had to go through this. Sometimes people make mistakes, but it doesn't take away from your achievement. You worked hard for that award, and nothing can change that." Her words were like a warm hug for my soul, and I began to feel a little lighter. She stayed with me until I calmed down, assuring me that despite the disappointment, I was still valued and loved. There are so many instances where my dad has shown clear favoritism towards my brother over me, and my mother has had several conversations with him regarding this. My dad always listens and makes an effort to be more involved with me, but it never lasts long, and he ultimately goes back to being super dad to Jerry. It's like a pattern that I've noticed throughout my life. Despite these moments of partiality, I have always tried hard to win my dad's approval. I have a genuine interest in his work, and in particular, developed a deep love for cars, partly because it seemed like something he valued. Even though it often felt like a one-sided effort, I kept hoping that my efforts would eventually make a difference and earn me the recognition and approval I craved from my dad. Last year, my dad filed for divorce with my mother, citing irreconcilable differences, marking the beginning of a challenging chapter in our family's life. I knew for a few years that the arguments between my mother and my dad had become worse and worse, but I'd never imagined that they would be divorcing. It was a difficult time for us as a family. My dad has since gone on to date several young women. 5 months ago, my dad called me and my brother for an important dinner. We sat down at the dinner table, and my brother Jerry and I, as our dad prepared to drop some unexpected news on us. The atmosphere in the room was tense, and I couldn't help but feel a knot in my stomach, anticipating what was coming next. With a serious expression, my dad finally spoke. "I have something important to share with you both. Gina and I got married." He looked at us as if expecting us to be overjoyed, or at least accepting of his decision. Jerry and I exchanged stunned glances. Gina, his latest girlfriend, was only 30 years old, just a few years younger than me. The shock on our faces must have been evident, but my dad continued, seemingly oblivious to our surprise. He went on to explain how he had found love again and how Gina brought joy and excitement into his life. I couldn't believe that my dad had decided to get married without even inviting us to his wedding or discussing it with us. My dad didn't just stop with that announcement and went on to say how proud he was of the business he had created and grown over the years. He said how he's been thinking lately about the succession plan of his business. I waited with bated breath for him to share his plans. My dad turned to look at me and told me that he had thought long and hard about this and decided that since I wasn't married yet and had no children of my own, I should forget about inheriting the family business from him. I looked at him, confused, as he went on to say that he had decided to hand over the entire business to my brother. Shock and disbelief washed over me as I grappled with the weight of this unexpected betrayal. It was a sucker punch to the gut, and the trust I had in my father began to crumble. Fury and betrayal bubbled within me as my dad dropped this bombshell. My entire world, built over a decade of hard work and dedication, was crumbling before my eyes. I stared at him, my jaw tight, unable to comprehend the magnitude of his decision. "Why?" I finally managed to utter, the words seething with a mix of anger and hurt. "I dedicated my life to this business. I built it with you. How can you just hand it over to Jerry?" Dad, seemingly unfazed by the storm he had unleashed, explained his reasoning. "Jerry has a family, a wife and kids. He needs the financial stability, and I believe he can take the business to new heights." His words hung in the air, and I felt the weight of his favoritism crashing down on me once again. I struggled to keep my composure, my hands clenched into fists. "Dad, this isn't fair. I've given everything to this business. I've worked alongside you and dedicated my time and energy. And now you're just going to cast me aside because Jerry has a family? What about my future, my dreams?" His response was callous. "You can continue to remain in your position and work under Jerry, but the business goes to your brother. That's my final decision." Anger surged through me, but I bit back my retort. I turned to Jerry, hoping for some support, a shred of empathy. Instead, he remained silent, avoiding my gaze. The disappointment I felt extended beyond my father. It now encompassed my brother, who chose not to stand by me. At that moment, I felt the weight of a lifetime of favoritism crashing down on me. It wasn't just about the business. It was a culmination of years of feeling second best. The sacrifice I made, the dedication I showed, all dismissed with a casual wave. "Resigned," I muttered a defeated, "Fine, Dad, if that's what you want." I turned away, the bitter taste of betrayal lingering in the air. I decided to walk out of his house without fighting with him any further. I couldn't shake the feeling of abandonment, the realization that my dad continued to favor his golden child, despite how hard I had worked over him. Later, in the solitude of my home, the weight of the injustice pressed down on me. The business I considered my legacy, my life's work, was slipping through my fingers. Anguish welled up, and the room blurred as tears blurred my vision. I had never felt so alone, so discarded. I decided to call up my mom, hoping that she would understand what I was going through. I told her everything that happened, how my dad favored my brother, how he took away the business from me, and how lost I felt. She was surprised and upset as I shared the details. "I never thought he'd do something like this," my mother said quietly, sounding sad. "To treat your brother so much better and give him the business completely instead of dividing the business equally between the both of you is completely unfair." Her words matched exactly how I felt, as I didn't mind sharing the business with my brother, but my dad had unfairly given it to him completely, despite how hard I had worked over the years. As we kept talking, my mom's voice went from surprised to determined. She told me firmly to try not to see this as the end, but as a chance for something new. "You've done amazing things, and you don't need his approval. Why don't you start your own business? You know a lot of clients would rather work with you than your brother," she said. Through her words, a flicker of determination ignited within me. If my dad thought he could strip away everything I had worked for, he was mistaken. The pain of betrayal fueled a silent vow. I would forge my own path and build something new from the ashes of what was taken from me. In the last 10 years, I have saved more than enough money for me to start my own business. The next day, as the reality of the situation settled in, I took decisive action. I reached out to more than half of the clients we had amassed over the years, mainly after the ones I had recruited over the years. These clients were the ones I had built relationships with and earned their trust. I told him about my dad's plan to give the entire business to my older brother, hence how I had decided to start my own company. The clients were as shocked as me, but surprisingly, the overall response was overwhelmingly positive. These were people who had come to admire my dedication, work, ethic, and the values that I brought to the table. They assured me that they were willing to follow me to continue our successful partnership under a new banner. The news of my departure from the family business spread throughout the industry, and some of my dad's workers even approached me, voicing their support that they wanted to work for me. It was like people were starting to understand that after my dad left the business under my brother's care, this would be a sinking ship. I handed in my resignation letter to my dad, and he was shocked. He scolded me that I should not ditch the company at such a crucial period, but I scoffed at his response and left. As the majority of the client base shifted allegiance, the once thriving family business began to crumble. Dad, caught in the crossfire of the fallout, watched helplessly as his grand plan backfired spectacularly. Over the months, my new endeavor has flourished. The support from loyal clients, coupled with my expertise, allowed me to not only survive, but thrive. My dad's betrayal spurred me to rise from the ashes, stronger and more resilient. The business I have built now, independent and thriving, is a testament to my tenacity. I can finally revel in the last laugh, knowing that my hard work, dedication, and resilience have prevailed against all odds. Meanwhile, I have learned from my mother that Jerry has no idea how to manage the business and is struggling to retain the remaining clients. I guess word of my success must have reached my dad, because he sent me a long message yesterday saying I was an a-hole for not helping my brother and keeping the family business alive, and how I had turned my back on family. He wrote how he was facing money issues and his new wife threatened to divorce him because he was unable to fund her lifestyle anymore. He ended the message by saying that he expected me to do the right thing by returning to the family business and bringing back all the clients I had so that I could keep our family business afloat. Update 1. Thank you for everyone's great advice and reassurance regarding my situation. To clarify a few things, I have no idea why my dad thought it would be a good idea for my brother to take on the business when we all knew that he had absolutely no idea about the family business. Jerry agreed to my father's wishes because he knew how well our business was doing and thought this would be an easy job with me taking most of the responsibility. He had expressed previously to us that he was unhappy at his job, hence I am assuming that he thought I would do most of the hard work for him, while he and his family would be able to enjoy the CEO title. As for those wondering why I'm not married yet, it's simply because I've always been a bit of a loner all my life, dedicated to my work. While I do have a girlfriend for the past 1.5 years whom I love dearly, and we have discussed marriage as a future goal, we both agree that we want to take some time to grow as individuals before taking the next step. Regardless of my marital status, I never expected my dad to give me the entire business. In fact, I would have been okay with a 70-30 split or even a 50-50 split between me and my brother, which would have been fair. If I didn't have any children in the future, my share of the company would have gone to my brother's kids eventually anyway. So there was no reason for my dad to be so mean and give the entire business to my brother. I did spend 10 years in this business and I deserve to have a share in it. I also never forced any of the clients to choose me over my dad's business. They opted to work with me because I was always the one who would go the extra mile, ensuring their satisfaction and building lasting relationships. I never wanted my brother to fail or our family business to be destroyed. The business failed because my brother still didn't know the ins and outs of the business, and my dad was too busy with his new wife to focus on his clients. My dad must have assumed that I would eventually give up my business and come running back to him asking for his forgiveness when I inevitably fail. But thanks to my hard work, I am not only standing firm, but thriving. It's disheartening to witness the downfall of a business I helped build, but it's a consequence of their own actions, not my intention. I plan on having a talk with my dad next week regarding this when I have some free time. Update 2. I finally had a talk with my dad. He called me over for dinner last weekend. Expecting an apology, I went to his place. I entered his place and to my shock saw my brother Jerry sitting there waiting for me. The atmosphere was tense, but I hoped they had called me here for a resolution. My dad took a deep breath, exchanging a glance with Jerry before dropping the bombshell. He started by saying how he was sad over what had happened between us, and he regrets that our family business was now in pieces. I raised an eyebrow, bracing myself for what was to come, expecting him to say that he had changed his mind. Instead, my dad started pressuring me to return to the family business as soon as possible, claiming he would forgive and forget if I did come back. Jerry joined in, blaming me for the business's struggles and calling me selfish for leaving him all alone to manage the business. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Dad, you handed the entire business to Jerry without even bothering about my future. How is this my fault? I retorted, frustration bubbling within me. Jerry scoffed. You took most of the clients with you when you left. That's a problem. They followed me because of the relationships I built, not because I forced them. You are welcome to try to get them back. If you were so good with retaining clients, your remaining clients would have not left the business either, I argued. Feeling the weight of their accusations, my dad sighed. Look, I don't want to see the family business fall apart. It's my source of income and it's how I sustain my lifestyle. Gina has also left me because of all of this. I want to enjoy my retired life in peace instead of trying to resolve this ongoing family drama. So stop being so selfish and just come back and work for your brother. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. I realized this wasn't the apology or resolution I expected. It was an attempt to force me back into a situation I worked hard to escape. Stunned and hurt, I stood up and looked at my dad angrily. I'm done with this conversation. I will gladly watch your business go down the drain, I declared, walking away from the toxic conversation. Ever since this conversation, I have been bombarded with texts and calls from both Jerry and Dad. They've been calling me names and blaming me for everything. It's emotionally traumatizing to see how my own family wants to take advantage of my hard work, and I have blocked them for now. Update 3. It's been 6 months since my last update. I'm happy to report that my business is flourishing, and I am also planning on taking the next step with my girlfriend by proposing to her soon. She's definitely the one for me, and I can't wait to be blissfully married to her. On a less positive note, my dad faced challenges as my brother drove his business into the ground. Eventually, he had to sell the entire enterprise to another company. Unfortunately, my dad didn't gain much from the sale, and what he did acquire was claimed by his new wife during their divorce. I've distanced myself from both of them since blocking them, and I've learnt about these developments through family friends with whom I occasionally converse. My mother and I have gotten closer over the months. Unlike what you may think, she treats both me and my brother equally. She understands my actions and is supportive of my new business. She has also informed me that my brother is planning to get back into accounting since the business has failed. Despite the challenges within my family, I'm grateful for the joy and stability in my own life. The support from my girlfriend and the strengthened bond with my mother are invaluable sources of strength. Focused on the positive aspects, I remain determined to succeed in my business endeavors. I'm optimistic about the path ahead and committed to turning challenges into opportunities for growth and success. Stay tuned for more stories from Argo Relationships.